The moving trucks had barely left 3 weeks ago, and Mike was still getting used to calling Oakwood Estates his home. After years of saving, he'd finally bought his first house, a modest 3-bedroom with good bones in what the realtor had called a well-maintained community. Mike pulled his work truck into the driveway after another exhausting day. His back ached from installing cabinets all afternoon, and all he wanted was a shower and maybe some takeout. The blue pickup with Johnson Contracting painted on the sides was dusty from the construction site. He made a mental note to wash it this weekend, right after he finished unpacking those last few stubborn boxes still sitting in his garage. Another day, another dollar, he muttered to himself, grabbing his lunch cooler and work jacket from the passenger seat. The early evening air felt nice after being inside all day. Most of the neighbors had been friendly enough. The retired couple next door had brought over homemade cookies. The family with 2 kids down the street had waved whenever he drove past. Several people had introduced themselves while he was moving in, offering help or recommendations for local restaurants. But then there was the woman across the street. Mike hadn't actually met her yet, but he'd felt her watching. Every time he came home, she seemed to appear behind her living room curtains, looking out with what could only be described as disapproval. Sometimes she'd be standing in her perfectly manicured front yard, phone in hand, seemingly taking pictures in his direction. Probably just paranoid, he thought. Moving to a new place always made him feel a bit on edge. As Mike walked to his front door, he noticed the woman was outside again. She stood rigidly by her mailbox, arms crossed over a bright cardigan. She was in her late 50s, maybe early 60s, with hair dyed an unnatural shade of blonde and cut in what his mom used to call the "can I speak to the manager" style. She wore beige pants with crisp plaits and sensible walking shoes. Their eyes met briefly. Mike raised his hand in a neighborly wave. She didn't wave back. Instead, she looked pointedly at his truck, then down at a clipboard she was holding, then back at the truck. She wrote something down, lips pressed into a thin line. "Okay then," Mike mumbled, digging for his house keys. Inside, he tossed his cooler on the kitchen counter and checked his phone. 3 missed calls from the same number. No voicemail. He didn't recognize it, so he ignored it and headed for the shower. Later, while eating reheated pizza and scrolling through his phone, Mike found the neighborhood Facebook group. He'd avoided joining until now, but curiosity got the better of him. After answering a few verification questions, he was in. The first post he saw made his stomach drop. "Attention all residents. Remember that commercial vehicles are not permitted to be stored overnight in driveways according to Covenant 7.3. Violations will be documented and addressed. Patricia Winters, HOA President." Below were several comments. "Is this about the new guy's truck? Here we go again. Give him a break, Pat, he just moved in." Mike scrolled through more posts. Almost half were from this Patricia person, all about rules, violations, or upcoming inspections. Mixed among friendly posts about lost pets and block party plans were Patricia's stern warnings about holiday decorations going up too early, garbage cans left out too long, and non-regulation mailboxes. He clicked on her profile picture. It was her, the woman across the street. A soft knock at his door startled him. Looking through the peephole, he saw a friendly face, the retired man from next door, holding what looked like a plate of brownies. "Welcome wagon round 2, said the man when Mike opened the door. "Thought you might like some dessert. I'm Bill, by the way." "Thanks, Bill. I'm Mike. Want to come in? Place is still a mess, but..." "Just for a minute." Bill stepped inside, handing over the brownies. "So has Patricia welcomed you to the neighborhood yet?" His tone suggested he already knew the answer. "The HOA president?" "No, but I think she's been taking pictures of my truck." Bill's face fell. "Ah, you've got a work truck. I was afraid of that." "Is that a problem?" "Let's just say Patricia takes the HOA rules very seriously, especially when it comes to anything that makes the neighborhood look working class." Bill said the last words with air quotes. Mike sighed, suddenly understanding why his dream home had been so affordable. "Don't worry," Bill patted his shoulder. "We've all been dealing with her for years. I'll fill you in on how to handle Hurricane Patricia. Outside, across the street, Patricia's curtains twitched closed. Mike stumbled out of bed Tuesday morning, still half asleep and fumbling for his coffee maker. He had a big job starting today, kitchen renovation for a family in the next town over, and needed to be fully awake before handling power tools. The sharp knock at his front door surprised him. It wasn't even 7 a.m. yet. He opened the door, expecting to see a package delivery person or maybe Bill from next door. Instead, he found nobody there. Just a bright yellow piece of paper stuck to his door with clear tape. "What the heck?" he muttered, pulling it off and squinting at the bold black lettering. "Notice of convenience violation," it read. "Commercial vehicles are not permitted to be parked in driveways overnight per Section 7.3 of the Oakwood Estates HOA bylaws. Please remove your vehicle within 24 hours or face potential fines and slash or towing at owner's expense." Signed, Patricia Winters, HOA President. Mike looked from the paper to his truck, sitting exactly where he parked it yesterday. The same spot it had been in for the past 3 weeks. "You've got to be kidding me," he said to no one in particular. Back inside, he dug through the mountain of paperwork from his home purchase. Closing documents, insurance papers, home warranty info, all of it scattered across his dining room table. Finally, he found the HOA packet. He flipped through it, scanning for anything about parking. Section: an endless list of rules. No clotheslines visible from the street. Christmas decorations must be removed by January 10th. Trash cans must be stored out of sight except on collection day. Section 7.3 said, no commercial vehicles, recreational vehicles, boats, trailers, or non-operational vehicles may be stored in driveways overnight. "But this isn't stored," Mike argued to his empty house. "This is my everyday vehicle. I need it for work." He was going to be late for his job. Sighing, he grabbed his phone and snapped a photo of the notice, then gathered his things. He'd have to deal with this later. Throughout the day, as he installed kitchen cabinets, the yellow notice kept popping back into his mind. During his lunch break, he called the number printed at the bottom of the HOA notice. "Oakwood Estates Homeowners Association, this is Linda," answered a pleasant voice. "Hi, Linda. I'm Mike Johnson. I just moved into 143 Maple Street. I got a notice about my truck today, and I'd like to discuss it. This truck is my primary vehicle, not just stored in my driveway." "Oh, I understand your concern, Mr. Johnson," Linda cut in. "But I'm just the administrative assistant. All violations are handled directly by the board. I can pass along a message to Mrs. Winters if you'd like." "Yes, please. Tell her I'd like to discuss this. The truck is essential for my work, and there was nothing in my closing documents prohibiting work vehicles." "I'll certainly pass that along," Linda said, her tone suggesting she'd had this conversation many times before. 2 days later, a second notice appeared, this one bright orange. "Second notice of violation. Failure to comply with initial warning. Fines will begin accumulating at $50 per day starting immediately." Mike crumpled it up, tossed it on his counter, and immediately called the HOA number again. This time, it went straight to voicemail. He left a message explaining his situation again, a bit more firmly this time. That evening, Bill from next door came over with a 6-pack of beer. "Saw you got the orange notice," he said, handing Mike a bottle. "Patricia's on the warpath again." Mike took a long swig. "I can't just get rid of my truck. I'm a contractor. It's how I make my living." "She did this to the Thompsons last year," Bill explained. "Their son had a work van for his plumbing business. They ended up having to park it at a storage lot 3 miles away." "That's ridiculous," Mike said. "I've called twice now. No response." "Try email," Bill suggested. "Document everything. Patricia likes to play by the book when it suits her." Mike sent a detailed email that night, explaining his situation and requesting a meeting with the board. He attached photos of other vehicles in the neighborhood that seemed to bend the rules. A dental hygienist with her name on her car door, a realtor with a magnetic sign. The third notice came just 5 days after the first, bright red with "Final Warning" stamped across the top. "Violation has continued despite multiple notices. Vehicle will be towed at owner's expense if not removed by 5 p.m. today." Mike called the HOA number repeatedly. No answer. He even drove across the street and knocked on Patricia's door during his lunch break. He could see her peering through the window, but she never answered. As he headed back to work, his phone rang, a number he didn't recognize. "Hello, this is Mike." "Mr. Johnson," came Patricia's clipped voice finally. "I received your messages. Rules are rules. Commercial vehicles are not permitted, regardless of your occupation." The way she said occupation made it sound like a dirty word. "But I need to talk to you about this," Mike started. "There's nothing in there." "The matter is not up for discussion," she interrupted. "The notice stands." Then she hung up. The job site had been a disaster all day. First, the wrong cabinets were delivered. Then a pipe burst when they were moving the sink. By the time everything was under control, Mike had spent 14 hours on his feet, his shirt soaked with sweat and water. "Just want to go home, take a shower, and crash," he told his assistant as they packed up tools. Today was one for the books. It was almost 9 p.m. when Mike finally turned onto his street. The headlights swept across the row of neat houses with their perfectly trimmed lawns. He was too tired to even notice Patricia's house as he passed it. But something was wrong. As he pulled into his driveway, his headlights illuminated. Nothing. The spot where his work truck should have been was empty. What that Mike stepped out of his car, confused. He spun around, looking up and down the street. Had he parked somewhere else? No, he definitely left the truck here this morning. Then it hit him. The final warning. The red notice. 5 p.m. deadline. "No way," he whispered. They wouldn't actually. But they had. His truck, with thousands of dollars of specialized tools locked inside, was gone. Mike's hands shook as he dialed 911. "This isn't really an emergency, sir," the dispatcher told him after he explained. "If your vehicle was towed due to HOA regulations, that's a civil matter. But there's over $5,000 worth of tools in there. I need those tools for a job tomorrow morning." "I understand, sir, but you'll need to contact the towing company. Do you know which one it might be?" Mike didn't. He hung up and stood in his driveway, running his hands through his hair. This couldn't be happening. A soft voice called from nearby. They took it around 5:30. Mike turned to see a woman in her 30s standing on the sidewalk, walking her dog. "I saw the whole thing. The tow truck, the HOA lady supervising. I recorded it actually. Thought it seemed weird they were towing from a private driveway." "You recorded it?" Mike asked, a small ray of hope cutting through his panic. "Yeah, want me to send it to you? I'm Jen, by the way. I live 4 houses down." "Mike." "And yes, please, that would be incredibly helpful." Jen pulled out her phone and found the video. She pressed play, and Mike watched as a tow truck backed into his driveway. Patricia stood on the sidewalk, clipboard in hand, directing the driver. The truck was loaded up and driven away, Patricia watching with what could only be described as satisfaction. She was smiling, Mike said, disgusted. She was happy about this. "She's been on a power trip ever since they elected her president," Jen said. "Did you know where they took your truck?" "No idea." "I caught the name on the side of the tow truck, Valley Impound. It's way out by the interstate. I can text you the video." They exchanged numbers, and Jen sent him the clip. Mike immediately called the impound lot. "Valley Impound," answered a bored voice. "My truck was towed from my driveway today. I need to pick it up immediately." "We're closed now, buddy. Open 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. But I need my truck for work tomorrow. It has all my tools." "Nothing I can do. We're closed." "Can't you make an exception? I'll pay extra." "Listen, man, I don't make the rules. We're closed. Security system's already armed. Come back tomorrow." The line went dead. Mike stood in stunned silence. Tomorrow morning, he had a huge client meeting, the kind that could lead to months of steady work. Without his truck and tools, he'd have to cancel. The new client would probably hire someone else. The porch light across the street flicked on. Mike looked up to see Patricia standing in her doorway, arms crossed, watching him. Their eyes met, and for a brief moment, Mike thought he saw a flicker of doubt cross her face. But then she turned and went inside, closing the door firmly behind her. His phone buzzed with a text from Jen, video sent. "Also, I posted about what happened on the neighborhood page. People are not happy with Patricia." Mike looked at his phone, then at Patricia's now dark house. Cold anger replaced his panic. This wasn't just about a truck anymore. Bill emerged from his house in a bathrobe, looking concerned. Just saw Jen's post. She towed your truck. With all your tools inside? Mike nodded grimly. And the impound lot is closed until morning. That's crossing a line, Bill said, shaking his head. Even for Patricia. Yeah, Mike agreed, scrolling through his phone contacts. And I think it's time I talked to a lawyer. Mike barely slept that night. He tossed and turned, thinking about his tools locked in his truck and the client he'd have to disappoint tomorrow. Around 6 a.m., he gave up trying to sleep and made coffee. His phone had been buzzing nonstop with notifications. Curious, he checked and found dozens of comments on Jen's post in the neighborhood group. This is outrageous. Who does Patricia think she is? That poor guy just moved in. What a welcome. Remember when she fined the Wilsons $200 because their grass was half an inch too tall? Mike scrolled through comment after comment. People he'd never met were defending him and sharing their own stories about Patricia. An elderly woman named Rose wrote, "She gave me a violation notice for my front garden flowers last spring. Said the colors weren't approved in the HOA guidelines. I've lived here 23 years." Another neighbor posted, "She measured my kid's basketball hoop with a tape measure and made us move it 2 inches back from the sidewalk." Someone named Tom wrote, "Last month, she took photos of my daughter's birthday decorations and said they were excessive. It was just a few balloons on the mailbox." The doorbell rang just as Mike was finishing his coffee. It was Bill, fully dressed despite the early hour. "Thought you might need a ride to the impound lot," he said. "Thanks," Mike said, genuinely touched. "That would be a huge help." During the drive, Bill filled Mike in on Patricia's history in the neighborhood. She moved here about 5 years ago after her husband passed. At first, she was just involved in the garden committee. Then she ran for the board because she was worried about declining standards. She's been president for 2 years now. "And nobody stood up to her?" Mike asked. Bill sighed. "A few have tried, but she knows the bylaws better than anyone. And she's got 2 other board members who always back her up. The rest of us just try to keep our heads down." The impound lot was exactly as far away as Jen had said, -30 miles outside of town. By the time they arrived, there was already a line of people waiting for the office to open. "Gonna be at least an hour," Bill said, looking at his watch. "Want me to get us breakfast? There's a diner down the road." "You've done enough," Mike insisted. "I can handle it from here." "You kidding? I wouldn't miss this. The whole neighborhood's invested now." While they waited, Mike called his client to explain the situation. To his relief, the client was understanding and agreed to reschedule for the following day. When the lot finally opened, Mike had to pay $275 to get his truck released. The attendant handed him a form with Patricia's signature authorizing the tow. "Never seen a personal driveway tow before," the attendant commented. "Usually it's illegally parked cars, abandoned vehicles, that sort of thing." Back in the neighborhood, Mike's phone rang. It was Jen. "You need to check the group page right now," she said excitedly. "Patricia just posted a response." Mike pulled over and opened the app. Sure enough, there was a lengthy post from Patricia. "Attention all residents. It has come to my attention that there has been discussion regarding recent enforcement actions. As your elected HOA president, it is my duty to uphold our community standards. The commercial vehicle in question was in clear violation of Covenant 7.3. Multiple notices were provided. If we allow exceptions, our property values will suffer. I have attached the complete HOA guidelines for your review. Remember, you all agreed to these rules when you purchased your homes." The comments below her post were scathing. "We need a new board. Who's up for a special election? 20 years in this neighborhood and never seen anyone's vehicle towed before." By the time Mike got home, there was a small group of neighbors gathered on Bill's front lawn. They waved him over as soon as he parked. "We've been talking," said an older man Mike hadn't met before. "I'm Richard, by the way. I was on the board before Patricia took over. What she did was wrong, and honestly, probably not even legal since your truck was on private property." "My daughter's a lawyer," added a woman in her 60s. She says you have grounds for a civil suit against both Patricia and the HOA. We've started a petition to call for a special board meeting, Jen explained. Almost half the neighborhood has signed already. Mike was overwhelmed by the support. I don't want to cause trouble. You didn't cause it, Richard interrupted. Patricia did. This has been building for a long time. As they talked, a car pulled into Patricia's driveway across the street. She stepped out, saw the gathering, and froze. For a moment, she looked uncertain, maybe even a little afraid. Then her face hardened. She marched into her house, slamming the door behind her. 5 minutes later, everyone's phones dinged simultaneously. It was a new email from the HOA account. Emergency IC. Due to recent community disruptions, all residents are reminded that gatherings of more than 5 non-family members on front lawns require a special event permit as per Section 12.4 of the bylaws. Violations will be documented. The neighbors looked at each other in disbelief, then burst into laughter. Oh, it's on now, Richard said, shaking his head. It's definitely on. 5 days after the towing incident, Mike was starting to feel like he belonged in the neighborhood. Not because of the house, he still had unpacked boxes everywhere, but because of the people. Neighbors he'd never met before stopped by to introduce themselves. Someone left a homemade casserole on his porch. The petition for a special HOA meeting now had signatures from over 70% of the homeowners. He'd even managed to reschedule his big client meeting, and it had gone well. The truck was back in his driveway, though he'd started parking it in his garage overnight just to avoid further trouble. Mike was fixing his fence gate that afternoon when Bill hurried over, looking concerned. You seen the weather report? Bill asked, wiping sweat from his forehead. The day was unusually humid and hot. No, been working since sunrise. Why? Bill held up his phone, showing a weather app with angry red and purple storm systems. They're saying we might get hit hard tonight. Flash flood warnings for the whole county. Mike frowned. How bad? Potentially very bad. They're talking 6 to 8 inches of rain in just a few hours. The creek behind the neighborhood could overflow. Has it flooded here before? Mike asked, putting down his tools. Bill nodded grimly. 3 years ago, Lower Street got hit worst, Oak Lane and the bottom of Cherry Street. Mike pictured the neighborhood layout in his mind. That's where Patricia lives, isn't it? Yep. Her basement took on 4 feet of water last time. A bunch of houses down there did. Mike's phone buzzed with an emergency alert. The National Weather Service was now officially warning of severe thunderstorms and potential flooding starting around midnight. Throughout the afternoon, the sky grew darker. The air felt thick, almost electrical. More alerts came in, each sounding more urgent than the last. Around 4 p.m., Mike noticed unusual activity across the street. Patricia was directing a teenage boy, presumably her son, as they loaded plastic bins into her car. They made several trips, filling the trunk and backseat. Smart of her to move valuables, Bill commented, having stopped by again to see if Mike wanted help securing his own property. Last time, a lot of folks lost family photos, important documents, that sort of thing. By early evening, the neighborhood was buzzing with preparation activity. People moved cars to higher ground, sandbagged doorways, and checked sump pumps. The local news ran constant updates, with meteorologists pointing to radar images showing massive storm cells headed straight for them. Mike had dealt with job site flooding before. As a contractor, he knew how quickly water could cause damage and how important proper drainage was. He went around his house, checking gutters and downspouts, making sure water would flow away from the foundation. As he worked, he noticed an elderly couple struggling with sandbags a few houses down. Without hesitation, he walked over to help them. "Thank you, young man," the woman said gratefully. "Arthur's back isn't what it used to be." "No problem at all. I'm Mike, just moved in down the street." "We're the Hendersons. Sorry about your truck trouble." Word really had gotten around. Mike smiled and continued positioning the heavy sandbags across their garage door threshold. By the time he finished helping the Hendersons, he noticed more neighbors who could use a hand. A single mom trying to move patio furniture by herself. Another elderly resident attempting to secure a loose gutter. One by one, Mike helped them all. His contractor skills proved invaluable. He knew exactly how to divert water flow, secure loose objects, and protect foundations. As darkness fell, he found himself down on Oak Lane, the lowest part of the neighborhood. He'd helped so many people, he'd worked his way down the hill without really planning to. A familiar voice called out to him. It was Richard, the former board member. "Mike, we've got a situation down here. The storm drain at the corner is partially blocked. Would you know how to clear it?" "I can take a look," Mike offered. As he examined the drain, he realized he was now just 2 houses away from Patricia's. Her house was dark, and her car was gone. She had apparently evacuated with her son and whatever belongings they could carry. The first fat raindrops began to fall as Mike and Richard worked to clear debris from the storm drain. Thunder rumbled in the distance, growing closer by the minute. "She's got a backup generator and a sump pump," Richard said, nodding toward Patricia's house. "But last time, the power went out and her pump couldn't keep up. Water came in through the basement windows." Mike glanced at the darkened house. Despite everything, he felt a twinge of concern. "Think she'll be okay?" Richard shrugged. "She's prepared. More than most." The sky opened up then, rain suddenly pouring down in sheets. They'd barely cleared the drain when they had to run for cover. "It's going to be a long night," Richard shouted over the downpour as they dashed toward his garage. "Hope everyone's ready." What nobody knew was that Patricia hadn't evacuated at all. She'd simply moved her car to higher ground and sent her son to stay with his father. She was still inside her house, alone, preparing for what she thought would be just another storm. The storm hit harder than anyone expected. By midnight, it wasn't just raining, it was like someone had turned on a fire hose from the sky. Lightning flashed so frequently that the neighborhood was lit up like daytime one moment, plunged into darkness the next. Mike had made it back to his house just before the worst hit. He sat by his window, watching water pour down his driveway in rivers. His gutters overflowed, unable to handle the sheer volume. Thunder crashed so loudly the windows rattled. Around 1 a.m., the power flickered once, twice, then went out completely. The sudden darkness felt heavy, broken only by lightning flashes and the beam of Mike's flashlight. "Great," he muttered, digging through a box for candles. At least his house was on higher ground. The folks down on Oak Lane would be dealing with much worse by now. The pounding on his front door came just after 2 a.m. It was so frantic that Mike jumped, nearly knocking over a candle. Who would be out in this weather? He opened the door to find a teenage boy, maybe 16 or 17, completely drenched and wild-eyed with panic. "Please," the boy gasped, water streaming from his hair into his eyes. "I need help. It's my mom." "What happened?" Mike grabbed a towel from the hall closet and handed it to the shivering teen. "Our basement's flooding. The pump stopped working when the power went out. Mom went down to check, and now water's coming in really fast. She can't get back up the stairs." Mike's mind raced. "Where do you live?" "Oak Lane. The blue house with white shutters." Mike felt a chill that had nothing to do with the rain. "Your mom is Patricia Winters." The boy nodded miserably. "I know everyone hates her. I know what she did to your truck. But please, she's trapped down there, and the water's rising fast." Without hesitation, Mike grabbed his emergency bag, the one he kept for job site accidents, and his heavy-duty flashlight. "Let's go." "I'm Tyler, by the way," the boy said as they rushed to Mike's truck. "I thought you were staying with your dad tonight." Tyler looked away. "I was supposed to, but he canceled at the last minute. He does that a lot." The drive down to Oak Lane was treacherous. Several streets were already underwater, forcing them to take detours. When they finally reached Patricia's house, the situation was worse than Mike had imagined. Water flowed like a stream across the front yard. The basement windows were completely submerged. As they splashed to the front door, Mike could hear panicked shouting from inside. "Mom," Tyler called, leading Mike through the darkened house to the basement door. "I brought help." Water had already reached the top 3 steps of the basement stairs. Below that, the basement was a dark pool, illuminated only by Patricia's failing flashlight somewhere in the murky depths. "Patricia," Mike called out, "where are you?" "Here." Her voice was tight with fear. "By the washing machine. The water's up to my waist, and I'm stuck. Something fell and pinned me when the shelves collapsed." Mike shined his powerful flashlight down, finally spotting her across the basement. Patricia was indeed trapped, a heavy metal storage unit pinning her against the wall. The water was rising visibly, inch by inch. She held her flashlight above the water with one hand, clutching at a pipe on the wall with the other to keep her head above water. "Hold on," Mike called. "I'm coming down." "Be careful," she warned, her usual commanding tone replaced by genuine concern. "The current is stronger than it looks. The window broke and water's pouring in." Mike turned to Tyler. "I need you to go to my truck. In the back, there's a small portable pump with a battery pack. Orange handle. Can you find it?" The boy nodded and rushed out into the storm. Mike waded down the stairs, the cold water immediately soaking him to his thighs, then his waist. The current was indeed powerful, pushing against him as he carefully made his way across the basement. "Why did you come back?" he asked Patricia as he fought his way toward her. Her face, illuminated by her failing flashlight, showed a complex mix of emotions: fear, embarrassment, and something like shame. "I thought I could handle it," she admitted. "I always handle everything myself." The water was now up to her chest, rising faster than before. Mike could see the fear in her eyes, real, human fear that had nothing to do with property values or HOA rules. "Don't worry," he said, finally reaching her. "We're going to get you out of here." For the first time since he'd moved to the neighborhood, Patricia looked at him not with judgment or disdain, but with genuine gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rush of water. "I'm sorry about your truck." Mike braced himself against the current and gripped the metal shelving unit that trapped her. "Let's just focus on getting you out of here alive. We can worry about trucks later." Outside, Tyler splashed back toward the house with the pump, racing against time and rising water. Dawn broke over Oakwood Estates, revealing the storm's aftermath. Downed branches littered lawns. Debris clogged gutters. Puddles the size of small ponds dotted the lowest parts of the neighborhood. On the front steps of Patricia's house sat three exhausted figures, watching as emergency vehicles finally made their way down Oak Lane. "They're about 4 hours too late," Tyler commented, wrapping a blanket tighter around his shoulders. Mike nodded tiredly. His clothes were still damp, his muscles aching from the night's efforts. Beside him, Patricia sat quietly, looking smaller somehow than she had before. "You should have gone to the hospital," Mike said to her. "That cut on your leg needs stitches." Patricia shook her head. "It's not that bad, thanks to your first aid kit." She glanced down at the bandage Mike had carefully wrapped around her calf after they'd gotten her out of the basement. "Besides, I think I've caused enough trouble." The rescue had been touch and go. By the time Tyler returned with the pump, the water had reached Patricia's chin. Mike had to dive underwater repeatedly to free her from the metal shelving. Once they'd gotten her upstairs, they'd spent hours battling the rising water, moving whatever valuables they could to the second floor, and finally retreating to the front porch when it became clear the first floor would soon be underwater too. Throughout the night, they'd worked together, former enemies united by crisis. "Your mom's pretty tough," Mike had told Tyler at one point. Most people would have panicked completely. "She's always been that way," Tyler had replied. "Handles everything herself. Never asks for help, even when she needs it." Now, watching the emergency crews begin their work around the neighborhood, Patricia finally broke her silence. "I don't know how to thank you," she said softly. "You had every reason to leave me down there after what I did to you." Mike shook his head. "No decent person would do that." "I wasn't a decent person to you," Patricia admitted. Her hands trembled slightly as she spoke. "I don't know when I turned into this, the person the whole neighborhood calls HOA Karen behind my back." Her voice cracked on the last words. Tyler put a hand on his mother's shoulder. "Mom, I've tried to tell you." "I know, honey." She patted his hand. After your father left, I felt like everything was out of control. The HOA rules were something I could control, something I could enforce when everything else was falling apart." Mike listened silently. The morning sunlight caught the tears in Patricia's eyes. "It started with good intentions," she continued. "I wanted to keep the neighborhood nice, safe. But somewhere along the way, I became obsessed with the little things. The rules became more important than the people." As they sat there, neighbors began appearing, checking on each other. Bill arrived first, bringing coffee in a thermos. "Thank goodness you're all okay," he said, handing out steaming cups. "Half the neighborhood was worried when they realized you were still here, Patricia." Others arrived, offering blankets, food, and help with cleanup. Many seemed surprised to find Mike sitting with Patricia, but no one commented on it. By mid-morning, the community had organized a cleanup effort. Teams worked their way through the neighborhood, checking on elderly residents, clearing debris, and beginning the long process of recovery. In Patricia's living room, now dried out thanks to Mike's pump and some quick work with towels, an impromptu HOA meeting had formed. Not an official one, just neighbors talking honestly for the first time in years. "We need to revise those bylaws," Patricia said, surprising everyone. "They're outdated and, frankly, some of them are just ridiculous." "Like the commercial vehicle restriction?" Mike asked with a small smile. Patricia actually laughed, a sound few in the neighborhood had heard before. "Exactly like that one. Your truck saved my life after all." A week later, a formal HOA meeting was held in the community center. Patricia stood at the podium, looking nervous but determined. "As my first act after being re-elected as HOA president," she began. "By a unanimous vote," someone called out, followed by applause. Patricia smiled, a genuine smile that transformed her face. "Thank you. As my first act, I'd like to introduce our new vice president, who will be helping update our bylaws to be more reasonable and community-focused." Mike stood up, still a bit uncomfortable in his button-up shirt instead of his usual work clothes. "And I'd also like to formally apologize to Mike Johnson for having his truck towed," Patricia continued. "Without his contractor skills and equipment, many of us would have suffered much worse damage in the flood. In fact, I'd like to propose we create an emergency response committee, with Mike as the chairperson." More applause followed. Mike looked around at the faces of his neighbors, no longer strangers, but a community he was proud to be part of. As the meeting continued, Patricia leaned over to Mike. "Still think I'm an HOA Karen," she whispered. Mike grinned. "Reformed Karen, maybe. But you're getting better every day." Patricia laughed again, and this time it sounded completely natural.